Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Ari Gunzburg of Mind Spark. Ari, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
No
Great to be
problem.
here.
No problem. Super excited to have you on. And before we jumped in, I want to read a little bit more about Ari so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And Ari is a rising new star in personal growth after experiencing trauma as a child and then extremely volatility as a teenager. As an award-winning international speaker, Ari motivates people using personal stories filled with triumph, tragedy, and transformation. Ari also helps inspire people using one-on-one coaching in his books for both children and adults. And new in 2020 was his debut nonfiction title, The Little Book of Greatness. Ari, are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's do it. So to kick everything off, I wanted to hear a little bit more about your story, your CEO story. Could you take us through your CEO story? What led you to start creating all this awesomeness?
So I was working in graphics and website design for a long time. I feel like a lot of people will be able to recognize this feeling. I kind of felt unfulfilled, I could do it. I was good at it, but it wasn't what I was like. It wasn't like waking me up in the middle, like early morning being like, oh, I got to get more of this stuff done. There's aspects of it that I really enjoyed, but not all of it, and not enough is the best way to put it. So I started doing a lot of exploration into what I should do. And at the time, I was also actually running a small little publication, which for some reason became like, my quote unquote baby that I was like, just, pushing and shoving to try and get it to stay alive. And so I started working with a business coach. And the first thing that he did very successfully, well, maybe not the first, but I'm saying one thing that he did very successfully is open my eyes to this little publication. He said to me, he's like, in your wildest dreams, what's the best it'll possibly do, like financially? And I, ran the numbers in my head for like a little bit, realized that like we're dealing with, really the best is like $250,000. And if it's like fantastic, $500,000, and we're talking gross, not net. So we're talking about not that much money. And it's not like, I was helping like orphans, like from get off the street and into homes or anything, like it was like a thing, like it wasn't like a passion project in the sense that I cared that much about it. And then when I recognized that the payout for it, the best possible potential payout, and again, most of the times things don't happen like the best, I was like, okay, it's time to shut this thing down. And we were like continuously working on this. And eventually I went in to speak to a bunch of incarcerated juveniles. It was a crazy story how it happened. But I ended up showing up. I spoke to them I was supposed to speak for like 30 minutes or an hour. Spoke to them for like an hour and a half. We all had a great time. I followed up with them afterwards, and like it was right around that same time I was listening to a lot of Les Brown, and just listening to other motivational speakers, and I was like, you know what? And so the coach at one point was like, what about speaking? And I was like, yeah, maybe. What about speaking? And so I've been on that journey ever since. That's about 4 years ago. It's a really hard, just so just so you know, it's a really hard business to break into, because there's a million different, and like I'm still working on like fully breaking into it and whatnot, but like there's a million different aspects to it, and there are also, by the way, I don't know if it's actually a million, but there's a million different places that are essentially trying to sell you like, oh, we're going to create this business for you and it'll work. And like, when you have so many people saying that we know so much about the business of public speaking that we can help you get into the business of public speaking, why aren't you just working in the business of public speaking instead of trying to sell to all the people who want to be in the business of public speaking, a public speaking course? And so I remain a little bit now. That's not to say that there aren't people out there who legitimately know it and legitimately can help people, but the question is which ones, you know what I mean? So like, so I've been on this journey for quite some time. I've been learning a ton of stuff. Finally, I did the book, which has been on my mind for a long time. And, I published that this past summer. And, I keep on working on it. And it's crazy because of coronavirus and everything, just because the live events space has drastically changed. And like you said before, I mean, pivoting is that's what 2020 is all about, is just moving around, picking something different to do. And so my journey for the past 8 months or so, I mean, we're in December. excuse me, we're in December now. So my journey for the past 8 months or so is really kind of a little bit of continuing to work on building my business, but also seeing what other projects I can do, at least in the short term or the medium term or the somewhat long term, just until the event space starts building back up again.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. I mean, I think, yeah, as we talked about offline, the key word for 2020 is pivot, and I've heard it so many times, and I think we've all had to do it in some form, shape, or fashion in business, in life, and in so many other, different ways. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think there's a huge kind of growth or boom in the selling expertise business rather than having the expertise business, and being able to distinguish between the two is something, yeah, it's so huge. But it's so funny. I feel like when you listen to the people that do actually have that expertise, a lot of times they'll come around saying, I tried a bunch of different things until I found what worked, and then I doubled down on that. That seems to
So
be
a couple things about that. First of all, I just recently saw a post on LinkedIn from a guy, David Koenigsberg, a friend of mine. He's like, he hired an expensive consultant who immediately looked around at his business model and said, you need to fire all of your people and switch to outsourcing it to places in wherever, right?
Mhm.
And he's like, so just because that model worked for you, it doesn't mean that it works for me. So, you can have the people who sit there just like me, who sit there and say, oh, I tried this and I tried that and I tried all these different things and I found out what works. Well, no, you found out what ended up working for you, and it might not be the same for me, and it might not be the same for 25 other people. That's one thing. The other thing is, I grew up like on the internet, like in its early stages a little bit. And so like, nowadays, I'll give you an example, right? I saw one that came around. So we have Hanukkah. It's actually Hanukkah right now. And then, a lot of other Americans have Christmas coming up, right? So people were posting on their status, right? Send me your, if you want to get a bunch of gifts, just send me your information and you'll get, you'll send one gift and you'll get back 6 to 20. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, right? Like it sounded like almost like a Secret Santa type situation. Like, this doesn't make any sense. There's no world where you give one and you get back 6, like if everybody's giving in an equal amount. So I reached out. I'm like, well, what's the catch? And, it was like a kid. She's like, I don't, my friend's daughter. She's like, I don't know, whatever. I'm just posting it. I figure like I'll send one and then maybe I'll get some stuff back. Who cares? I said, okay, fine. But she sent me like over like what she's been sending people. And basically what it was a chain letter from like the 90s that somehow remanifested itself as a gift giving chain letter, right? Right. Basically like you send a gift to the name on the top of the list, move that name one down, put your name on the top of the list and start doing it again where everybody sends you a gift and then I'm like, oh man, because and the reason where I'm going with all this, by the way, because I do have a point. It may not be where I'm going with all this is that I remember like way back when, right? And they still have them, earn 10,000. We have a perfect system to earn $10,000 a week online. You don't have to do anything, or you have to do very little. And you're like, if you have a perfect system like that, like if you really truly do that, you don't need to charge money. Why aren't you hiring people and paying them a nice salary of $5,000 a week to put your system into place? Because if I had that system, I would have no problem saying, look, I'll pay you $250,000 a year, do this, and I'll make my $250,000 on top of that. And I don't know a single person, unless they're already making money like that, that would say no. Like if I could sit there and be like, look, you're going to make over between $150,000 and $250,000 a year, and I'm going to make double that, whatever. Like who's saying no? Who's saying no to that? You'll give me a job and you'll pay me a ton of money to do the system and you'll make money also. Okay. I'm on board, that's what it comes to. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, a lot of times you kind of have to measure the things and use your due diligence, I guess you can say, and say if it doesn't add up, then it may not actually add up, because a lot of times people will just say stuff and take it for word. And
if
so
it's too good to be true, it often is. Right?
Exactly. But I wanted to drill down a little bit deeper to hear a little bit more about your book and MindSpark. Could you take us through a little bit more about that and what you're building?
Absolutely. So MindSpark is what I was continuously finding is that it was hard to because if you sit there and say I'm Ari Gunzburg and I work for Ari Gunzburg, it kind of gets redundant. How many times can you say that in a sentence? But the idea was to be able to just have a brand name that, like, okay, I'm Ari Gunzburg and I'm a speaker and I have this public persona, but I also work for this brand, or I'm the founder of this brand called MindSpark, and MindSpark is focused on spreading a little bit of light, spreading a little bit of hope and peace and everything else. And so, I mean, that's actually the imprint that I put on the book is MindSpark. So the idea is that I can sell my programs, my books, my speeches through MindSpark. And if I end up getting to the point where I want to work with other people, then, I can sell their books, their programs, their stuff. And it may end up being a multi-person brand. It may end up being just a single person brand. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter so much to me as long as people have one, I guess, brand that they continuously are working with. But the book, so just to get into the book, right? So I developed this thing called the 5 Keys to Greatness. And the 5 Keys to Greatness are developed in a way, they're light enough in the sense that it's not a concrete system like step 1, step 2, step 3, now step 1, step 2, step 3. It's a framework. It's a framework that anybody can apply to their life. And we were talking before how people say, oh, this will work for you because this is what worked for me. And that's, my goal is not to say this is what's going to work for you because this is what's worked for me. My goal is to say, these are the 5 main key areas in your life that you can pay attention to and bring yourself to a point of greatness. Now, how you will do that will be very different from how I will do that. So I'm not asking you to do it my way. I'm asking you to just see that these are like super key areas, super important key areas of the life to focus on, to bring you to your own level of greatness. And then you implement them your way. You do it exactly how you want to do it. And, I went through, the story I tell, and it's not a story, it happened, but like I was driving around for a summer. I drove almost 9,000 miles in one summer. And I spent a lot of time in that car and, all the rest of the time as well, coming up with this concept. And I kept on coming up with different things and saying, well, this is really important also. And then finding that it would really fall into one of the main 5 areas. I wanted it to be as simple as possible, to be easy to remember. And, if I give you 10 key areas of your life, like I saw like on a company, these are our 50 core areas that we care about. You're like, 50? Who in the right mind is going to be able to remember all 50, right? Mm-hmm. It gets to the point where you're diluting all of them because you have so many. So I came up with 5. And if you come up with something else and you look at it, you'll be able to find that it fits into one of the 5, almost guaranteed. So I have the book. I am working a little bit on a workbook, right? Somebody actually mentioned, they're like, oh, there's no exercises in the book. Well, I plan to put the workbook separately with its own information in it. It's still dealing with the 5 keys to greatness. And I recorded, but it's still in post-production, a video series that discusses the 5 keys to greatness as well. And so those are the 3 main core products that are, right now only the book is available. Those are 3 main core products to help people interact with the 5 keys to greatness. I'm presenting the same information, the 5 keys to greatness. So that doesn't change, but it's not like the information you see in the book is the same as the information that you see in the videos. And that's not the same as what you're going to see in the workbook, meaning you can buy all 3, let's say, and each one is different. It's not like I've read other stuff also where like you buy the second one, you're like, this is basically like the first book just with a few different words. And I just paid all this money for a book that's basically the same thing. So I worked very hard to make sure that that's not the case. And, and I do share that the 5 keys are, I don't know if you are interested, but, I'm certainly happy to tell the listeners what it is, because again, right, I'm happy if you get the book and read it. It's written in story form, so it's super easy to read. It's only a few hours long. It's not that difficult. But the main idea is that we all have this opportunity to unlock this greatness within us. And the 5 keys, if we just, spend a little bit of time each day focusing on them. So that's why, like, I don't mind telling people what they are, because the ideas are just developed more in all the other products that I'm offering. And those, I use a mnemonic to tell over what it is. This way it makes it super, super easy to remember. It's the 5 keys to greatness. So the word to remember is great, GREAT. It's give, right? We give more of our money, our time, our life, anything. There's many, many different ways to give. Reason, we want to have a reason for living, a purpose. Engage, we want to be more present in the present moment, right? We want to be with what's happening, not like, let's say we're having this interview right now, not sitting there and thinking what I have to do tomorrow and what's going to happen with this project that I'm working on. We don't want to be focusing on everything else. We want to be focusing on the here and now moment, being present. Amazing, having a positive mindset, a positive attitude. and tenacity. Persistence is literally what changes the world. And so the more that we apply persistence and tenacity to the things that around us, the better off we'll be.
Nice. Well, I definitely appreciate you for breaking that down. And would you consider your ability to be able to kind of, I guess, synthesize that information, understand, and develop that framework as what I would call your secret sauce, the thing you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
Sure.
Hmm.
That's been a big, so, that's been a big issue that I think that I've had. Um, like my gut feeling is that one of the things that I'm dealing with in my own marketing and my own presentation, et cetera, is like the branding aspect of it. And that's something I've been struggling with for quite some time. Like, what is my secret sauce? Now I have this, the 5 keys to greatness, I guess. I mean, they're unique, right? Nobody has them. So that is one version of it. I have another idea that I'm going to be integrating the 5 keys to greatness into, that is mid development. And so this is one of my issues is I have shiny object syndrome, where I could be sometimes be working on 5 different projects at the same time or more, and then start new ones. And it's not, just to be clear, right? I've gotten much better at actively working on 5 things at a time. I don't really do that anymore, but I still may have 5 or 10 open ideas that I would like to be implementing and like to be working on, that I may continue to add stuff to. And so that's been one of my struggles. So like the book, I mean, I was able to get the book out, and but so like it's like I'm like, for instance, just to give you an example, like I'm really, really torn. Like, do I put more time and effort into the workbook, which goes with this book, or do I put more time and effort into this other program that I'm trying to build, which I know, like the 5 keys to greatness is only scratching the surface. This other one is so incredible that so it's very, very hard. But I try to be able to focus on different things. And then coronavirus hit, of course, and that just messed everything up. Plans are very, very difficult when there's so much uncertainty in the world, which it's very difficult for everybody. I mean, but we're getting there. I think we're making progress meaning the world. I think the world is making progress in coming to terms with what it is all about, and it's an uphill battle. But I think we're making progress, slowly but surely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Nice. That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's an entrepreneurial struggle, so to speak. Once you start to see one ideas, you start to see them everywhere. I often compare it to a game of whack-a-mole, where you try to hit them all at the same time, and often it becomes very, very difficult to do that. But I think that the biggest thing that I took away, or I learned, was that finding the one thing, that not that you do just one thing, but that domino that hits over all the dominoes larger, is really a great opportunity. And I wanted to switch gears a little bit. And I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
That is a great question, and I'm drawing a blank, which is why I'm like sitting here and being like, let's see, what's a great hack? So you know what? Let's talk about this, because I actually was just bringing this up in a mentoring chat that I'm in. There's an app out there called ClickUp. If you don't use a project management app, and you're not that, you probably want to use a project management app, even though they are a little bit tedious sometimes, and they if you don't update them often, they can often be more of a hindrance than anything else. But so this app is called ClickUp. It's absolutely fantastic. A lot of people will sit there and say immediately, but I use Asana, but I use Trello, but I use Rike, but I use this, but I use that. This chat that I was in the other day, there were a few other fans of it as well, and we were all talking up ClickUp. And the way that I put it, I think, is probably, maybe, I mean, you could maybe argue it, but I think that ClickUp is so advanced, right? Meaning ClickUp does what Asana does, but better. ClickUp does what Rike does, but better. ClickUp does what Trello does, but better. So it's so advanced that it's basically, once you understand the full power of ClickUp, all the other apps out there are basically obsolete. Like that's how impressive it is. And so, if you don't use a project management app, or even if you do, check out ClickUp. It's absolutely fantastic. One other good CEO hack that I have, that I don't use often enough, but I should, is what I sometimes think of as downloading my mind, right? Like I'll sit there and let's say I have like a million notebooks that I have notes written in, and you know, I took a course, and so I jotted down notes, and I did this, and I have this idea, so I started writing stuff up and everything, right? Every once in a while, and I probably should do it more often, I go through all of these notebooks, and I download all this information into an app that's called Workflowy, which is basically like an outline list on steroids. It's, you know, and they do like an unlimited plan or something. It's like $5 a month or something. It's not expensive, but it allows you to sit there and have all of your information in these lists that you can then go ahead and look back at later. Now, do I look at it that much? Not really, but the main point of it for me usually is being able to like keep all my data in a space that I can later figure out like where where I wrote that down, and you know where I can find that thought process. And one last thing is nature. You know, that's really the truth is this is another thing that's been nagging at me for quite some time. My brand probably is and should be like nature, but I just don't push it hard enough. I kind of like have to, I guess, just pick and choose and just say, okay, this is what it's going to be, which is very hard because we are not little tiny boxes that can only do one thing. Nobody is. We're humans. We're incredibly talented. We have all these different things that we can do really, really well. However, when we're trying to sit there and develop a personal brand or a business, if we try and sit there and tell people all the things that we can do well, we lose out on everything because nobody can remember any of that, and they don't care. They want to think that you do only one thing, right? So you sit there and, you know, like I was talking to somebody, I think that does like IT type stuff. I'm like, you probably would do better if you just focus on one thing. He's like, I know, but then we do that one thing, and then people say, oh, do you do websites? Oh, do you do security systems? Oh, do you do this? Oh, do you do this? And we're like, yeah, sure, why not? Right. So I mean, it's something we're all struggling with, I think, branching out into different things that we think make sense, but that really are kind of off brand. But yeah, definitely. Sorry, to get back to your question, that's my fault. Nature, get out and spend some time in nature with trees around, with cacti, with depending on what part of the country you're in. I mean, there's almost always even a small local park near you that you can go and just be around, like a few trees and a little bit of grass and some bushes, right? I mean, like that type of thing. I'm talking like more like New York, right? But again, right, there's always a place you can go and just appreciate a little bit more of nature and get a little bit away from the man-made stuff. You'd be surprised how cathartic and healing it is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely appreciate that. And so you were kind of touching on a point that I wanted to ask you a little bit more about. So I was going to ask you for what I call a CEO nugget, which is kind of like a word of wisdom or a piece of advice. But maybe this is around, you know, your CEO nugget about that focusing aspect. What are your thoughts on being able to, or advice as well, which is really what the nugget is about, being able to balance the ultimate, I guess, or unlimited potential that we have as humans with being able to communicate that and synthesize that in a way, just like you did with your 5 keys to greatness?
Great question. So first of all, I'm going to go in a few different directions with this. I'm sorry. So first of all, I've always had an idea, and I've never fully implemented it well, but I've always had this thought process of like when I'm working and focusing on just one thing, these ideas pop up and come at me. I should have either a notebook or like in my other thoughts, I should have like an app or like a place to sit there and just drop the ideas into that I can then later look at. And this is something people talk about a lot, right? A lot of times when we have these thoughts like flying through our head and like all these different ideas, and maybe I'll do this and maybe I'll do this, and here's a way to do this and here's a way to do that, and here's a way. If you can get it out of your mind, right? They say like leave a notebook by your bed because you can sit there and jot these things down. If you can get it out of your mind, so you're not worried about losing that idea anymore, then you can not think about it maybe and focus on the things you really need to focus about. And you brought up focus. I mean, focus is all important. We can't do anything unless we're really focusing and honing in on that particular idea. And so your question had been sorry. So I, I
Yeah,
wanted to
just
draw back. I wanted to get back to your question right now with those two preambles.
just
The
as long
question,
as how can you take all these the unlimited potential we kind of have as humans and be able to communicate that so that it doesn't become overwhelming or at the
yeah,
same time boxing yourself into a certain
absolutely.
aspect?
So I think if we recognize that we are a time-based creatures in the sense that, like, let's say you have a particular thing you want to do really, really well. I mean, you can spend like a year or two or three or five working on that particular thing, and then you can evolve, I guess you could say. I mean, that might not be the best word, but I think it works. You know, we don't have to be stuck. If I decide I want to be a house painter, right? I don't have to be a house painter for the rest of my life. I can go be a house painter. I can get really good at it. And in 5 years, I can decide I want to go be a computer programmer. right? Yeah, it's difficult to switch, and it's an extreme example. But the point is that while you're a house painter, just focus on being a house painter. While you're a computer programmer, just focus on being a computer programmer. So that's why I was talking before about downloading ideas from our mind, about having a place to store those ideas, so that when you're sitting there and you're focusing on, let's say you want to get a radio station up and running, or you want to get a podcast going, or you want to build websites, whatever the idea is that you want to do, while you're focusing on that, any other thing that comes across your plate, unless you have the resources to deal with it, which most of us don't, right? If somebody has tons of money and they want to sit there and put money into something where they don't have to worry about it, that's one thing. But like most of us then don't necessarily have the time or the resources, and time as a resource also, to do that. So you got to put it off. You got to put it off to the side. You have to sit there and have, and you don't want to have those evaluations every week. Like, well, what's my best idea that I'm going to work on this week? Because you're going to be getting 50% of the way done with 25 different ideas, which will get you nowhere. You need to get 80 to 90 to 100% done on an idea, and then move on to the next one, and then get 80 to 90 to 100% on an idea, and then move on to the next one. So that's why, like, if you could just sit there and pull those ideas out and put them off to the side until you have time and the resources to work on them, it'll help. I have a friend who's really into the best way to describe it is geeky board games. So I end up being, because I would never have known about this stuff to begin with, and I never would have played it, and I never would have gotten as into it as I did without him. But anyways, the point is geeky board games, right? And one thing that you find in these geeky board games a lot, like what they call a mechanic, and I'm butchering the word and the concept because it's not really the mechanic, but what you see a lot in the games that are the best is very, very, very limited resources. And so what it ends up being is that you have to make really difficult decisions about, let's say it's a turn, and so you only have two things that you can do that particular turn. How am I going to maximize these two things that I'm doing so that I can get as far as I possibly can get? And we have to take that exact same thing into our life. I mean, a lot of times what ends up happening is we feel internally like we have unlimited resources, but we don't. We have very limited resources. We have a limited amount of money. We have a limited amount of time. If we can convince people to come on board with us, then we have a little bit more quote unquote time, or if you want to call it man hours or woman hours, whatever you want to call it. But no matter what, no matter how you look at it, there's always a finite number of resources. And so the question is where do you want to direct those resources to? And that's why focus is so important, because this way you're directing all your resources into this one particular thing, or these two particular things that will have the biggest and best payout,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what I say, necessity is a mother of invention. A lot of times those constraints are what allow you to create and basically get better at a certain aspect. So I appreciate you for breaking that down. And I wanted to ask you now.
About that, I just read recently that one of Dr. Seuss's books, I don't remember which one of Dr. Seuss's books, maybe it was Green Eggs and Ham, he was challenged to write a book using only 50 different words.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it was The Cat in the Hat, whatever it was one of these books using only 50 different words or 200 different words, meaning he was given a constraint and he developed a masterpiece. That's the lesson that I want to just pull out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Making lemons out of taking lemons and making lemonade. Absolutely. So now I wanted to ask you my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And we're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Ari, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Vision and communicating that vision is really what's going on. The more that we have a vision of where we need to have an idea of where we're going, right? We need to have that vision, and we need to be able to communicate. If we can't communicate that vision, then you can't get buy-in. I mean, you can get people, okay, fine, I'll do it, but you're not getting very far with that kind of attitude. But when you get people who are like, oh, this is the best thing ever, this is the most amazing thing, and I just want to be able to like bring it, I want to be able to help it get to where it goes, to where it's going. That really allows us to achieve so much more than without it. That's it's also interesting because when you have that vision and when you're able to communicate that vision, then you also essentially are giving, to a degree, guidelines to the people that are working with you so that they understand what they need to do to be able to fit into the guidelines of what your overall vision and what everything is going on. So that's why if there's something wrong, you can look at what, if your vision is, if what you're doing is aligning with your vision, and what you're asking your people to do is aligning with your vision. And then also you can look at how you're communicating that vision to your people. Are you communicating that vision to people? If you're not telling them what the vision is, they can't work towards the same goals that you are. They're going to work towards whatever goals you're telling them. So it's all about being able to express it and making sure that people are all on the same page.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely love that vision and communication. And I appreciate that definition. I appreciate your time even more. What I wanted to do is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best they can get a hold of you, get a copy of the book, find out about all the awesome things you're working on.
Awesome. Thank you. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody. I appreciate, also thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. I do have this book out, The Little Book of Greatness. I've got a very, very, very basic website up for it called, the URL is littlebookofgreatness.com. If you type in the littlebookofgreatness.com, it will also get there. On there, there's a link directly to go buy it, or a link to download the first 2 chapters for free. You can definitely check out the book. People, it's getting rave reviews. People enjoy it a lot. And you can check it, and you can get in touch with me on ariguns.com or find me on many of the socials. And again, thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Appreciate you having you on as well, too. We have the links and information in the show notes as well. But thank you so much again. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.